Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, Jay. We've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We have topics for you today. The off season is here. Not a whole lot going on, but we are finding stuff to talk about and we are finding content for you to enjoy that will make you think, that will make you ponder, and you might even say, these guys aren't very smart. Nope, you won't say that for very long because we are going to prove you wrong. Zach, are you ready to prove people wrong that think we aren't very smart?
No. I'm just here to. I'm here to keep it cozy. You can't see it; it's backwards,
Okay.
but we're keeping it cozy.
All right.
We got. By the way, is there really such a thing as a college football off season?
I mean, kinda, not really. Like you get spring and stuff like that. If you're casual, there is, but
But we're
if you're
only,
not,
but only Kent's casual. We're not casual.
we're not. You're right. You're right. Only Kent. That's his role.
Yes. John's pushing for 2.5 hours tonight.
Yeah, no, John. I have a Big Ten after dark to do after this, so can't do 2 hours. If I do 2 hours, look at that. Zach's bringing up comments now.
You've given me the power.
Yeah, I can't do 2 hours. I'm going to be doing a Big Ten after dark, so you might get 2.5 hours after that. Between this show and that show together, but yeah, probably not. Hey, Billy, good to see you. Says hi to gents. Good to see you here. Let's let's get into it, right? Let's
Let's
talk.
do it.
Yeah, I say, John, you're gonna want to tune in for Big Ten after dark. You're gonna like that episode. So, all right, Zach. USC could possibly cancel their yearly rivalry with Notre Dame. So the this was kind of hinted at last season and in Big Ten Media Days last year. Lincoln Riley seemed kind of unsure about it. Well, there was an interview done with the athletic director of USC. Her name is Jennifer Cohen, and she had a lot to say. I'm just going to read it. It's kind of a long quote, but I'm going to read it because I think all of it is interesting. Zach, I want you to tell me if this sounds like somebody who is confident they will be continuing to play Notre Dame every single year. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
She says, it's such an important series for our fan base and both universities. I've said this before and I'll say it again. In an ideal world, we are going to keep playing each other. With that being said, the landscape has changed dramatically. We're now playing in a conference where we fly back and forth across the country every other week, and college football playoff expansion and how you get access to the CFP and how things are seeded and selected. Those to me are important unanswered questions. So we remain in conversations with Notre Dame about this series. I think we're clear to each other that we're going to continue to evaluate what's best, and it's my job to evaluate what's best for our student athletes and our program. As we keep doing that, we're excited to go back to South Bend next year. Zach, your thoughts?
Whenever you use the words "in an ideal world,"
Yep.
that means you recognize you're not in an ideal world. And so that seems like a pretty big hedge to me.
I agree. I think this is one of those situations where USC, like, they recognize what's going on. They recognize how much they're traveling. And to them, they're thinking, why would we keep? I mean, Iowa has no problem keep playing Iowa State, correct? Because Iowa
Mhm.
State is close to them. They might be out of conference, but it's a guaranteed kind of out of conference game, big out of conference game for them every year. I think USC is the type of program that wants to go out and play other SEC schools, right? They're not going to want to be content with just playing Notre Dame every single year. And if you put an SEC team on top of that, that's going to be increasingly difficult for you, your team, everything else, especially if you're traveling as well. Say you travel to both Notre Dame and, I don't know, Arkansas, in the same year. That's a lot of travel on your team. If you got, what, 4 away games in the Big Ten that year, that's 6 away games. And most of them are going to be pretty far away. So I could see it happening. I don't like it, but I think the solution is, Zach, this could possibly turn Notre Dame into a team that is thinking about the Big Ten. You look at the Nebraska situation with Tennessee, they're not playing each other in the coming 2026 and 2027. A lot of people are speculating it's because of the playoffs and expansion and everything. Nebraska did come out with separate reasons, and Tennessee was the one that said they refused to move the game. So I do think there's backstory to it that also needs to be recognized. But this could be something we see start to happen, right? Teams canceling more out of conference games in order to get, at least in the Big Ten, in order to get a softer out of conference schedule because they're already playing 9 conference games. On the other side, you have the SEC playing 8 conference games and 1 big out of conference opponent. So why would the Big Ten make themselves play 10? In USC's case, why would they make themselves play 11? Right? I don't like it. I'm not saying this is good for the sport or anything like that. But if USC did it, I would get it. And I think that at this point, it's kind of in Notre Dame's court. The ball's kind of in their court right now to say, look, either join a conference, get with the times, or you're risking losing, rivalries and stuff. What say you, Zach?
So I think you're right that things continue to move towards Notre Dame joining a conference. And I think ultimately it would be the Big Ten. And, I said it back when USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten back in 2022, when that was announced. I put out an episode about how much of a shift that was in the college football landscape. And then literally the next day I posted an episode saying Notre Dame's going to join the Big Ten eventually. So I do think that, and I think even with the talk of playoff expansion, automatic qualifiers and automatic bids, Notre Dame's in this weird spot where media deals are still going to bow the knee a little bit to Notre Dame because of their cachet. But I do think at some point it does get a little bit less and less advantageous for Notre Dame. It still isn't there's still a massive advantage, and part of it was the payout for the playoff. Like, they don't have to share any of the playoff money with anybody. So until it becomes less and less of an advantage for the Fighting Irish, there's no incentive. But if you're saying, you may not get an automatic qualifier, or you're saying that you're gonna lose rivalries and lose revenue as a result, again, those are things that could matter. Now, to the question at hand, is this a smart move for USC to cancel a series with Notre Dame? And I think you have to ask the question, that the AD saying, in an ideal world, we would want to play. Well, what's making it not ideal? And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the travel, and the schedule's gotten more difficult. Here's my pushback to that. No one's buying that when you're losing to Maryland. USC's problem is not Notre Dame. USC's problem is USC. And to me, to say, well, maybe we should stop the series, I don't think that's not where you go first. You've got to look at your program. When Lincoln Riley is out here saying, I don't know if we should play Notre Dame because the schedule's a little too hard, that's a coaching problem. That's a motivation problem. And listen, if you're USC and you're joining the Big Ten and you're losing in year 1 to Minnesota, to Maryland, to a mediocre Washington team, to a Michigan team that had its worst quarterback room in 20 years? The problem is not Notre Dame. The problem is USC is poorly coached. And I'm excited about Danton Lynn. I hope Lincoln Riley rights the ship. But this is about USC and how they've become a mediocre program. And Notre Dame's not the problem for them.
Yes. So I definitely think part of what you're saying holds truth. And I said some of it when I did the Nebraska video about it, right? Where I was like, why is a Nebraska team that just went 7-6 last year, why would they be so concerned with the playoffs? Now, that was an accusation that was made by other people. That's not directly what the athletic director at Nebraska said. He talked more about, the financials and stuff like that. But that was implied on the revenue sharing and trying to get more players so that way they can compete at a higher level. Because if you have less stadium capacity, you want more games so that way you can make more money for your program. I understand that. But I also, like I said, I also don't want this to turn into, well, USC just plays Notre Dame every single year, and that's their only out of conference game because, they're traveling so much in the Big Ten and they're playing 9 conference games. Like, to me, everybody who's mad at USC and saying, like, oh, you want to cancel out of conference games and you want to cancel your rivalry game, I keep telling people, don't be mad at USC. I get it. Like, they're the ones, out here making the decision. It sucks for them. But be mad at the SEC that they're only playing 8 conference games. Be mad at like the whole situation with the way the process works. Like, that's the kind of stuff in my mind you should be mad at. I get what you're saying about USC needs to be better and they need to concentrate more on not being mediocre, maybe than their future playoffs, take one step at a time. But as far as I'm concerned, like, anybody who's firing at USC here and says USC's a bad program and they're not well run and, they're just wimps and soft, I'm like, how many other teams would sign up for a cross-country trip every single year when you've already got 3 or 4 other cross-country trips happening that year? Like, there's a reason why people started playing conferences that were more regional. And I get people saying, like, well, USC got themselves into this mess. No, they didn't. The Pac-12 got themselves into this mess because they didn't know how to operate and they didn't know how to get a TV schedule, and they were going to fall behind like the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, all them if they didn't move. Thankfully for them, they had the opportunity to move.
Yeah, and those are fair. Those are fair things. I think my frustration, one, aside from 2020, the last time USC and Notre Dame did not play was 1945. So, like, we're talking World War II, I think, canceled this rivalry. And then COVID canceled the rivalry. And that's it. Like, they've played every year. So, like, part of it's the circumstances, but I don't want to lose a historic rivalry that's been around for a long time.
I don't either. I'm just saying, don't blame USC for it, Well, like, they're the ones having to make the tough decision, but who's making the decisions around him to force him to? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I still blame USC a little bit, but that's I'll ask this though, because I think you're right in that the cross-country travel, I mean, we said it all last year, that the cross-country travel was going to be a bit of a bear, especially for the West Coast teams. Do you think, though, that losing Notre Dame on a yearly basis might affect recruiting and affect their marketability at all?
I don't think so, because I think you're getting plenty of marquee Big Ten games, right? You're playing Michigan, you're playing Ohio State, you're playing Oregon, you're playing Penn State. You're getting plenty of big conference games out on the Northwest. And again, that's like, this is why I go back to asking the question, like, could this lead Notre Dame to the Big Ten? Because Notre Dame right now doesn't have anything special about them playing, those out of conference games, other than it's a rivalry. It's been a rivalry. But what are teams going to prioritize more? Making the playoffs and getting that check, or playing Notre Dame? Like, at this point, if Notre Dame wants to secure these rivalries and play them more often, they just need to join a conference. And I get it's their tradition. We're battling tradition versus tradition here. I don't like it. I want Notre Dame to have their tradition.
Yeah.
But don't be mad at Notre Dame because it's not their fault. The way things are going right now, this is the way things are going. Either that, or they need to get into a scheduling agreement with the Big Ten instead of the ACC, which I thought that was a possibility before because of the NBC partnership with Notre Dame and the NBC partnership with Big Ten. I thought that would have been the possibility before, but now with all these automatic qualifiers, and I know Notre Dame, they get their stuff, so like they're fine automatic qualifier wise, being out of a conference, but still, like, with those affecting how other teams are going to schedule in the out of conference, like I think Notre Dame is probably going to be stuck playing ACC and Big 12 teams, maybe an SEC team every now and then, but not many.
Yeah. Well, and if their schedule, like if they didn't have Texas A&M on the schedule, this year, which Texas A&M wasn't great, but who's the win that props up Notre Dame to get in the playoff discussion? It's probably I don't even think they played Clemson this year.
Their win that propped them up this year was Texas A&M.
Yeah. So, and you combine no ranked wins with a loss to NIU, it may not matter if they're 11-1 at that point. They may not get in.
Yeah. And then they're supposedly supposed to be playing Miami and Florida State and Clemson more often. But those programs are not impenetrable. We just saw Florida State go 2-10.
Florida State stinks right now.
This is a program that's not built on recruiting. This is a program that's built on the transfer portal.
Yep.
And then you have Clemson, who refuses to go to the transfer portal. I mean, I think they took one kid this year. I think he was from Purdue, actually. But you have a program that refuses to go, and then you have Miami that just wants to buy all their players. So,
right.
Are any of these really sustainable avenues to try and continue to build a program? No. And that's the problem right now with Notre Dame is I think I was trying to articulate this, Fisherman. They will make the playoffs, don't get me wrong, but you're going to be losing out on big games every year because you're going to have Big Ten teams and SEC teams that aren't going to play you in the out of conference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the SEC is more likely because of their 8-game conference schedule and stuff. But a lot of those teams have an ACC team that fills their 9th, big game, and then they like playing their 3 cupcakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Trojan Fight makes a good point here too. That no, wrong one. Sorry, Fisherman.
I do that all the time.
But yeah, so USC's might cancel, but Michigan also did the same thing several years back. And I think it was Michigan. Was that mutual Michigan Notre Dame, or was that Michigan's urging to cancel that with Notre Dame?
I don't remember exactly who it was, but yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
But so here's maybe a better case. How about everybody stop playing Notre Dame until they join the Big Ten? I'm okay with that. Big Ten agreement, USC, calculated, hey, we're just done playing you.
I mean, yeah, we've talked about that before. I don't think the Big Ten would ever outright go out against a team like that. But
they should.
Yeah, I mean, sure. But yeah, I mean, I look at it and I say, as long as the SEC only has 8 conference games, which they say is going to change, I'll believe it when I see it, though. They've said it's going to change for a while. As long as they only have 8 conference games, there's no reason for the Big Ten to go and play an out-of-conference marquee game. Ohio State's going to keep doing it. Michigan's going to keep doing it these bigger programs are because they know it's good for, the home games and stuff and getting that revenue. But, I mean, if you're a smaller team, why? And I hate it. I don't want it, but it is what it is. Hey, Dorian. Good to see you. Hey,
Dorian.
Happy Sunday to you as well. But yeah.
So. John, real quick, John makes a comment. Never forget Alabama was able to play a cupcake in the middle of the conference season. What if
there's a lot of SEC teams do that. Yeah, they play it right before their rivalry game.
What if the SEC goes to a 9-game conference schedule, but they make another addendum where Alabama can play Mississippi State 9 times?
Sure.
Sorry, that was a dumb
They would
comment.
love that, wouldn't they?
I'm just gonna. Happy Sunday.
Mississippi State would never be good. And then they just have to sacrifice for the rest of the SEC.
Watch Mississippi State beats Alabama 9 times in a row.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, Zach, let's get to our next topic here.
All
right. Good. Will the Big Ten revamp their conference championship weekend? So if you follow Pete Nakos of On3, he was reporting on this. I believe it was Friday, maybe Saturday. I think it was Friday, though. He was reporting on the fact that the thinking of the SEC and the Big Ten possibly going to revamping their conference championship weekend. They are apparently saying, well, these conference championship games that are kind of meaningless, let's not get rid of those. Let's actually add more games, and make it a bigger deal, which sure. But the basically the way it would work out is your number 1 would play your number 2. Your number 3 would play your number 6. Or your 6. Yeah. And then your number 4 would play your number 5. So if this came out last year, it would have been Oregon versus Penn State, Indiana versus Iowa, and then Ohio State versus Illinois. And both Oregon and Penn State would get in. Those are your top two. And then the winner of Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio State, Illinois, those two winners would then get into playoffs. So they're essentially play-in games for the playoffs. I don't like the idea of the Big Ten having play-in games. I don't think you need it. I don't think that it makes any sense. I think that it's, in a way, just trying to make conference championship weekend more exciting. And I mean, sure, maybe it does, but I don't think you bend to the will of the Big 12 and the ACC for this. I think you make those teams play on conference championship weekend. You say, earn it. Because the Big Ten and the SEC are, quite frankly, just too strong for that. What do you think of the idea, Zach?
It's funny. We're like disagreeing a lot tonight. I kind of like the idea, if I'm honest. Now, I hate it if there's no wild card spots, because I think that would be the deal breaker for me. If it's a 16-team playoff that they expand to, then I love it. If it's 14 and there's like one wild card spot, which I think it would be, it's either one or two wild card spots with a 14 team, then it's a no-go for me. Because I think part of the problem with the play-in game is, like, Ohio State's a really good example. Like, everybody knew that they were, at least from a talent perspective, one of the best teams. And then you're going to make them play another game where if they lose, they're probably out, which, I would say if those were the rules, I'd be like, well, yeah, they're out. They lost. And at that point they lost to Illinois, and it's like, okay, like, Illinois deserves to be in. But I would like it if there is, for the teams that have an extra game, that are forced to play an extra game, like, kind of a safety net there. But I do like, what's the whole point of this playoff? It's, aside from determining a true champion, it's to expand access. Well, what a better way to expand access to a team like Illinois, who is, we just saw the committee completely disregard them in the world of 3-loss teams, but they get a shot. Like, they'd get a shot in this model, and say they upset Ohio State because they're still down off of what happened against their rival. Well, then all of a sudden Illinois gets to say they were in the playoff. And so I like it from that perspective, if there are wild cards to be a safety net to the teams that are forced to play. But that would be my main condition.
I hear what you're saying. I just, like, to me, I don't understand why the Big Ten can't say, let's have Illinois and Iowa play the second place and third place ACC teams, right? Like, why are we making them play the third and fourth place Big Ten teams? Like, if you're the Big Ten, you have all the power here. You can make the ACC and the Big 12 do whatever you want. And, like, I get it. People don't like this kind of stuff because it's, not the way college football was the way before. And I get that. By saying this stuff, like, I'm not saying that I'm advocating it and I want college football to be this way. I'm just saying, if you are the Big Ten and you treat yourself as the big bad, kids on the block, and you can do whatever you want, which I think the Big Ten needs to start doing, because that's what the SEC does. And I think, that's what the Big Ten essentially needs to start doing if they want to start gaining the respect of, AP voters and everything else. Like, then you go out there and you say, actually, our third and fourth place teams are going to be in the playoffs. Your second and third place teams, ACC and Big 12, you're going to actually have to play a play-in game versus the fifth and sixth teams in the Big 10. Like, could you imagine Illinois versus SMU? That'd be a great matchup.
Yeah. So my pushback there, because I hear what you're saying, the last thing I want is for the Big Ten to do what the SEC does. And I get why, like, because the Big Ten I think they do hold the most power, even though I think there's more SEC bias.
And they hold the most money, which is the most power.
Yeah. Big Ten holds the most, but I would, like, my preference, this is again, in an ideal world, I would like the Big Ten to use that power to actually create equity amongst the conferences. which is not what the SEC has done. And I think we've seen the Big Ten do that in the past. I mean, that's how they operate as a conference, right? Like Ohio State, we've always argued like Ohio State should throw their weight around more. And it's like they do throw their weight around, but in ways that are frustrating to Ohio State fans sometimes because they make sure that Purdue is just as protected as Ohio State. And I actually find that admirable. And so I think my pushback would be, I think that actually might go against the kind of the foundation of who the Big Ten is as an organization, is to kind of throw the ACC and the Big 12 under the bus. If they have to, they'll do it. But I think from a sport perspective, I think that's a bad idea. For the Big Ten, it'd be great. But I think from a sport, yeah.
Yeah, and like that's what I was trying to say when I was saying like I don't necessarily want this. Like as a college football fan, that would be absolutely awful. I'm not saying I want this. But if you're the Big Ten, like the days of being Mr. Nice Guy is over. You know, I mean, we talked about it with the hiring the coaches, right? There's been a shift in how the Big Ten hires their coaches and going after each other's coaches and stuff like that. It is more SEC like now because there is more money to be made, and programs like, you know, are wanting to make the playoffs. I mean, USC and Nebraska is thinking about making the playoffs, and they just both went 7-6 last year. So, like, you have this thought here. So and also too, like Doreen brings it up. She's an Ohio State fan. She says so Ohio State benefited by not playing the extra game. That's another thing I'm thinking about here. Why would I want Ohio State and Indiana to play an extra game when I could just force Illinois and Iowa, or force, SMU and who was third place? Miami? Force SMU and Miami to play Illinois and Iowa. Like, could you imagine like how much more fun that would be to see an SMU versus Illinois and an Iowa versus Miami, rather than seeing Iowa play Indiana and Ohio State play Illinois? I mean, neither of those teams played each other last year, but they could have, and it would have just been a rematch of what we saw before.
Yeah. I don't know. I still don't know if I like, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I can get on board with it because I think if the Big Ten wants to play hardball with any conference, I would play it with the SEC. I don't like the idea of playing it with the ACC and the Big 12, but that's me.
I agree with you because I dislike the SEC, but financially, like you have to play hardball with the ACC and the Big 12. Like those are your ops. Right now, the Big 10 and the SEC are buddy-buddy.
Yeah.
Because they're the two most powerful, which I hate too, but it is what it is.
I'll just say, would you get rid of conference championship games, at least in the SEC and the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going anywhere because they make too much money. But I mean, if I had the option to, I would.
Yeah.
They don't do anything for you. I mean, I told you what my option would be. My option would be everybody plays on conference championship weekend. And you play the team that is close, like that is right next to you in the standings. So 1 plays 2, 2 plays 3, 4 plays 5, but you have an extra bye week during the season. And so you count that as part of the season, and there would be tiebreakers broken because 1 is playing 2, 3 is playing 4, 5 is playing 6, and those are also epic games. Like, people would not be complaining about Indiana's schedule last year if Indiana was forced to play, I guess it would have been Ohio State again, but imagine if it was somebody else. Imagine if Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan. Haha, I get it. But, like, they would have played Penn State instead.
That would have been a heck of a matchup, too.
Exactly. So I'd be more in favor of that. Then you actually get games that are, like have to be there. But, anyway. All right, let's move on to the next topic. A lot of good thoughts in the chat, everybody. We appreciate it. Let's get to some canceled spring games, Zach. All right, so Ohio State, Nebraska, and USC have all canceled their spring games this offseason. Minnesota was ahead of the pack. They didn't have a spring game last year. I think that was their first year. It may have been the year before that. But they already didn't have a spring game, so theirs has been canceled. Zach, I'm curious your thoughts here. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but like are canceled spring games killing college football to you? Like, is this something that is a treasured thing that you thought of before? Like, what's your thoughts here on the canceling of spring games?
I don't think it's killing it, but I think it's a reminder of what we've lost and how things have shifted. And I think it also shows things aren't settled. And I think we saw it particularly with Ohio State, because it's not just that they had the long schedule, but you have to shift everything because the schedule ends as late as it does. And so I think we keep saying it. I think a lot of the ideas that have been implemented, a 12-team playoff and NIL and all that stuff, like, I think they're good ideas, but they've been poorly executed and poorly aligned up to this point. And that's why there's these sacrifices of scheduling, spring games, conference championship weekend. This is why we're talking about all this, is because we've implemented good ideas and they've been poorly executed and poorly aligned.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, spring games are awesome. I took my daughter and my son to the Ohio State spring game last year. Had a ton of fun. That's probably the only time they'll ever make it into the stadium. I mean, maybe when they get older later on, but I went with my my brother and his son, and it was really, really cool. It was just a really, really neat experience. So as far as I'm concerned, like, you have to have something in the spring that's in the stadium for the fans. Like, I'm not saying it has to be a complete spring game, because I get that the spring games, at least for Ohio State, not every school does this, but Ohio State wasn't even tackling last year, so to a certain extent, it's not even a full spring game, and I get that was a complaint of other people as well. But as far as I'm concerned, like, I think this is going to be bad, but I also don't know. I want to see what these schools come up with, right? Are we going to be seeing Jeremiah Smith be thrown one-on-ones against, Devin Sanchez in the end zone? Are we going to see, some one-on-one matchups with running backs and linebackers? Like, I don't know. What are we going to see in these spring games? It's supposed to be some kind of spring showcase challenge, at least with Ohio State. And I know some other schools are thinking of stuff like this. So if you're just going to completely get rid of it and there's no celebration, there's no game, there's no going to the stadium, yeah, it absolutely sucks. This is not college football. This is the NFL. But if you can do something, even, Dave says it here, like, even if it's something like 7-on-7, which I'm not advocating for, I'm not saying I like, but it's something that gets you into the stadium where you can see players and you can see what they do. And for everybody, they want to see something different in spring games. I talked to some people, they want to see the fourth string wide receiver out there in the spring game. I talked to some people and they want to see Jeremiah Smith every single play out there. They want to see, Dylan Raiola out there. They want to see, put your big name player out there. They want to see those guys because they haven't seen him in a while. But as far as I'm concerned, if you just put something together in the stadium, fine by me. Because get the fans in the stadium. It's what, $20 tickets, sometimes free? Like, and also you charge for it. There's NIL money.
Right. Yeah.
Don't charge for it too much. Make sure a guy can bring his 2 kids with him.
Yeah.
One's gonna fall asleep anyway. That's
the heart of it is it's welcoming families to these events and welcoming new fans to get them excited about the season. So this is the first topic we actually agree on.
Oh, there we go. How about that?
There we go.
Well, we don't agree on the next one. So.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, actually, we ranked them differently, so that's why we don't agree.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get into it. All right, everybody, we're going to hit commercial really fast, and then we're going to come back and talk about spring QB battles. If you are thinking to yourself, wow, JR and Zach are really going through this quick, we are, because we have, not we, Zach won't be doing it. I'm going to have a Big Ten After Dark basketball episode right after this. So we're trying to keep this at an hour long. I know I said that the last episode, we went an hour and 40 minutes, but we were actually trying at this point. And halfway through the episode with an ad, we are at just over 30 minutes. So we're actually doing okay this time. Wow. We might actually be done after an hour here. But I see everybody in the chat. Like, you guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate everybody's comments. And I really, just encourage you to be going back and forth with each other. Not like in a, arguing and be mean to each other way, but you guys are sharing a lot of good ideas, and it's really cool stuff. So, all right. Let's do commercial really fast, and then we'll come back and we will talk about the spring QB battles. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate you being here. Please do like and subscribe. I always forget to say that at the beginning. Like, subscribe, listen on the podcast, 5-star rating if you're there. Do all that good stuff. Rate the show. If you're watching this after the fact, comment your thoughts on anything that we had to say. Do try to go through the comments and see what you guys have to say. I do think it makes the show better when you all share and we get to have some back and forth on, your opinions, your topics. And that's one of the reasons why we do live shows, because I really appreciate the chat, and I love that you guys get to have your opinions out there and share those too. So appreciate it, guys. All right, Zach, we have some spring QB battles. Now, there might be some more that people consider spring QB battles. These are the ones that I'm considering QB battles. I'm not considering Illinois battle, Indiana, Iowa. I think Gronowski. I mean, he's not even playing in the spring, I don't think. I'm pretty sure he's still going to be injured and probably won't be throwing. He'll be there, but I don't think that's going to be a battle. Michigan State, Aiden Childs has that one. What are the ones am I missing? Northwestern, I think Preston Stone has pretty much sealed that one. Dylan Raiola, Nebraska. I'm trying to go through all of them.
Drew Aller,
Penn State. They're not losing that. Rutgers, Athen Kaliakmanis is there. He's not losing that job. And then Washington, there's some people saying Washington could be a QB battle, but they've been so outspoken about Damon Williams that I can't see that being a thing. UCLA. Yeah, I mean, their only other option is a guy that was a freshman last year, and he didn't get any time at all. Zach, I think it's weird. Like, I'm seeing some power rankings of like QBs out there for the Big Ten. I'm seeing Joey Aguilar as like a top 3 quarterback for some people in the Big Ten. You and I had him in the bottom half of our rankings.
Well, I think, to be fair, though, we don't know much. I don't feel like we know much about Joey Aguilar.
Yeah, I mean, he did have a good year in the Sun Belt 2 years ago, but then I think they went either 5-7 or 6-6 this year.
He was not good this year.
Yeah, this year he wasn't great.
2 years ago, he was very good. Last year, I mean, he was, well, we don't have to rehash it.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah. I mean, he had a good year 2 years ago. He was good in junior college, so maybe he is, but I can't, like, to me, I can't put him ahead of Dylan Raiola. Like, I saw more out of Dylan Raiola at a bigger school with better competition. No offense, App State, but that's just where I'm at. Yep. All right, so our QB battles that we're going to be talking about here, and we are going to give our top 5 QB battles in the spring. Those are, different for the way we're ranking them, but I think it's going to be interesting. Maryland has Justyn Martin and freshman Malik Washington. Michigan has freshman Bryce Underwood and transfer Mikey Keen. Minnesota has Zach Pyron and Drake Lindsey. Transfer Zach Pyron and true sophomore Drake Lindsey. I don't know. He might be a redshirt freshman. Anyway, he was only there for 1 year. Ohio State has Julian Sayin and Lincoln Keinholz. Oregon has Dante Moore and Austin Novosad. Purdue has Malachi Singleton, EJ Colson, Evans Chuba, and Garrett Odom. Garrett Odom is the son of new head coach Barry Odom. And then 2 more, Jayden Maiava and Husan Longstreet at USC. And then finally, Wisconsin is Billy Edwards and Danny O'Neal, both transfers going into that program. Zach, we don't need to go through every single QB battle, but just give me, what are maybe some QB battles that catch your eye here, you're thinking a little bit more about, and then we'll get into our top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. This isn't one of my top 5, but we were talking about it pre-show. I do think the Minnesota one is a little interesting, because I think if you talk to Minnesota fans, they are pretty convinced that Drake Lindsey is the guy. But Pyron coming in as a transfer, it'd be interesting to see, like, does seniority kind of help him a little bit as he comes in? I think Lindsey is certainly the front runner right now, especially in the minds of a lot of Minnesota folks. But yeah, so that would be my honorable mention. I think Oregon and Ohio State. It's interesting that for Ohio State we didn't mention Tavian St. Clair at all, because I know there are some not many, but there are some who are like Tavian St. Clair is like legit good. It is like, guys, Julian Sain's also a 5-star quarterback, and
Yeah, the
Keinholz is
Justin Fields comp that I forget who gave that to him. Somebody gave Tavian St. Clair a Justin Fields comp, and everybody lost their mind. It's like,
yeah.
Justin Fields also didn't start his freshman year, so hold on.
right. Yeah, he had to battle with Jake Fromm.
Yep.
Don't know if that was smart, but and then I think Oregon's just, I think, two talented guys, and I think Dante Moore, like you'll talk about it more, but I think Dante Moore is the clear leader in the clubhouse right now, and I think Novosad would have to be head and shoulders better to justify putting him above Dante Moore at this point.
Yeah, I put that in there, and I said, some people are going to look at that and they're going to say Oregon's not a competition. Dante Moore's got the job, and I get that. But I just think like Austin Novosad is like he's not some 3-star that just came out of nowhere.
He's
like,
talented.
The dude, yeah, he's very talented. He decommitted from Baylor and went to Oregon because he felt like he had a shot to be the starting quarterback on a national championship type of program. Like that's the reason he didn't go to Baylor, because he didn't want to play for a program that wasn't going to compete for national championships.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to Oregon where he thinks he can be the starter and he can compete for national championships there, which Oregon has shown that they can do that. Now, does that mean that he's going to start over Dante Moore? No, I still think Dante Moore is a starter. He's had experience at UCLA. He came in last year, learned the system for a year while Dylan Gabriel was there. He got the primary number of snaps as the backup and everything. I think Novosad, threw for 7 yards on like 2 passes last year or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he got very much time, but one of those situations where if Dante Moore does start showing some of the deficiencies that you saw in his UCLA years, you could see Novosad possibly be there. Don't think it's likely, but it's there. The obvious one that's the most interesting is Purdue. I mean, everything going on. 4 different quarterbacks there, all different quarterbacks who were backups are transferring in, trying to be the starter. I think Garrett Odom coming in. I mean, he's not a super highly rated guy, but he is the coach's son. So does this turn into high school sports, where the coach's son plays? I don't know. But I think it's really, really interesting. And, I know not too many people are going to be locked into Purdue spring camp, but I will be, because I want to hear who the starting quarterback is.
Don't let the Boiler Express guys hear you say that.
Hey, I'm here for it. And then a lot of people think Jayden Maiava is going to be the guy at USC. I think he is too. But there's also rumblings about Husan Longstreet is just a dude, and he's really, really good, and he's kind of the the prototypical guy that Lincoln Riley wants. Now, other people will argue Jayden Maiava the same way. I get that, but was Jayden Maiava, did he struggle last year with interceptions, turning the ball over and stuff? Did he struggle last year because he was thrust into a bad position late in the season, or is that just who he is? We're going to find out, and if Lincoln Riley deduces that Jayden Maiava, that's just who he is, we could possibly see Husan Longstreet. Don't think it's likely, but it could possibly happen. So those are my why are those in here type of lists, and I think you touched on Ohio State for that, but yeah, those are why they're in there. All right, Zach, tell us how you're ranking your top 5 spring QB battles, and then we'll start with number 5 for you.
Yeah. I am ranking them so my thought is just what's the most intriguing. So I think Ohio State and Oregon's are clearly the ones that are going to make the most impact on the season, because they're the two best programs on our list. Michigan, I think, is going to have an argument as well going into the season. But like I think Ohio State and Oregon are the best programs. Like, they were in the playoff. Oregon won the Big Ten. Ohio State won the national championship. So, but I think it's pretty clear who's going to win those battles. So I went with most intriguing, and that's how I ranked my top 5.
So who's your number 5 then?
So my number 5 is Purdue. My number 5, the reason why I have Purdue that low is because there's nobody there that you're like, oh, like, I'm really excited about that guy. Right? It's 3 transfers.
Hard to be intrigued on a guy that you've never really seen play. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the intriguing part of the battle is that there's so many options, right? You have the coach's son that's there. You have all these transfers that were backups at previous spots, and you have a new coaching regime. So that makes it exciting. I don't know if any of the prospects are exciting, which I don't mean that as a knock on Purdue. But I think it's intriguing because of the number of guys, and can one guy actually separate from the pack? I think that's the big question, because I think if someone can, I think it gives Purdue fans a little bit of hope going into next season.
Yeah, I agree. So I went with most impactful. These are the quarterback battles that I think are going to be the most impactful to the Big Ten next year. So as in whoever wins this battle could, either win the Big Ten or shake things up in the Big Ten. So my number 5 on that is Wisconsin, actually, because Billy Edwards and Danny O'Neil. I think Billy Edwards is going to be the guy, but Danny O'Neil is also coming in with, some promise as well, came from San Diego State. And if you do find a playmaker at this position, who's to say Wisconsin doesn't get an upset or two this year, right?
Yep.
Luke Fickell is putting together, a team where he's trying to show Wisconsin that he can build a winner. Who's to say Billy Edwards doesn't turn into that playmaker that, fans are just looking out, for years to come and be like, man, that guy, I don't think he's this guy, but how many of you remember playing Juice Williams at Illinois in the past? Like that guy gave us fits. He almost took us down and ruined our season. Could Billy Edwards, could Danny O'Neil be that kind of guy? I don't think so. That's why I have him at 5, but the potential is there with how many big time teams they're playing this year in the Big Ten.
Thanks for reminding me of 2007 Ohio State. Thanks for that.
Juice Williams will always strike fear into me. Always.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Him and Rashard Mendenhall.
And Rondell Moore.
Yeah.
He's not a quarterback. He's just a really fast player that destroyed Ohio State.
That we couldn't tackle. Number 4, I have Michigan. And them and my number 3 team, I think, are in similar situations. A good veteran and a superstar young guy. And I think for Michigan, I like Mikey Keen a lot. I think he's an upgrade to all the quarterbacks that Michigan had a year ago. I think he's steady. I think he makes good decisions. And I think he can really help Michigan be in contention for at least a better season than a year ago, maybe a playoff appearance. But man, if Underwood beats him out, it's a signal to you of where they could be going. So that I think that's just very intriguing. I think that competition will signal just how good is Underwood and how early does he get in.
Yeah, I like the thought there. If I was going by intriguing, I might put him 2nd or 3rd, but yeah, they'd definitely be in my top 5 for sure. All right, my next one, most impactful, along the same lines as Wisconsin, but I feel like we already kind of know who the starter is going to be here. Maybe not. We'll see. But USC is my next one, and it's just because Jayden Maiava, I think he has a little bit more of that playmaking ability in him than Billy Edwards does. He almost took down Notre Dame last year if it wasn't for some of the interceptions. They were driving down the field with him. He just made bad decisions, turned the ball over, and so. Because of that, I do think that both of these guys are more dynamic, bigger playmakers than Billy Edwards and Danny O'Neil. Not saying they're better players, just more dynamic playmakers, and that's kind of what I'm going for there. Yep. So that's my number 4. Your number 3, Zach.
Number 3 is USC. Again, I think Maiava is probably a better quarterback than Mikey Keen. I think it's probably a more even, it's probably more tilted towards Maiava, but Longstreet, who is a 5-star prospect, I think
very good playmaker. His tape is like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see this being a tighter competition just because I think Longstreet gives Lincoln Riley, the type of quarterback that he likes to have, dynamic playmaker. And Maiava, as good as he is limited. Like, you look back at his recruiting rankings and you look at how he plays, he's limited in terms of his overall ability, right? Like, he's not Caleb Williams. He is like Caleb Williams in the sense that he can move, he can throw, but like, there's a reason why Miller Moss played as much as he did before Maiava came in. So I think, again, it's a very intriguing battle. It's, I think, similar to Michigan. I think it'll probably be tighter.
Fisherman is actually along the lines here of where I kind of am. Longstreet will lose the job, and I think he will too, but take over halfway through the season. If the season is going like it did last year for USC, I could definitely see that happening. We'll have to see, but I think late in the season, that's kind of what Lincoln Riley was like, we need a playmaker. We need somebody in these late game situations that can win it for us. Yeah. And that's what Joe R is touching on here. He says USC had so many late game meltdown last season. And I think if you have a playmaker, maybe some of those are not as close as they were, but maybe you win some of those as well, right? Because you have a guy who does make plays for you. So yeah.
I would bet that Longstreet is the starter by the Nebraska game.
Which week is the Nebraska game?
That's November 1st. It's after their second bye, after they play Michigan and Notre Dame back to back.
That was around the time that Miller Moss was benched too, right? Because Maiava got 4 or 5 games last year.
Yeah. USC will probably be 4-0 going into Illinois. They play Missouri State.
Yeah, because they don't play Notre Dame until like week 6 or 7, right?
Yeah, but then they get Illinois by Michigan, Notre Dame by.
Yeah. Joe said that was supposed to be meltdowns. Yeah, I got what you were at there. Yeah. I just, when I first read it, when I read it down there, I was like, wait, no, it's meltdowns. I know what he means. Okay. My number 3 for most impactful is Ohio State. I think that Ohio State has better receivers than the other two that I have up there. I'm not knocking one of these teams' wide receivers. The second best wide receivers are number 2 for me. But I think that is kind of why it's a little bit less impactful for me, is because even if it is a Lincoln Keinholz, he's going to be thrown to some of the best wide receivers in the country. He's got the best player in college football returning out there. So while it is impactful, like, I don't know if this quarterback is going to make as much of a difference as the other two, because their weapons aren't as good as Ohio State's. Not saying they're bad. One of them has really good weapons too, just not as good, in my opinion.
I don't know if you need a caveat with they're not as bad. Like, I think if people are sitting here saying Jeremiah Smith's not that good, I was like, come on, guys. Like, let's just be real. I'm just
trying to make sure people know that who I say for number 2, I'm not saying they have bad wide receivers, because they don't. They have good wide receivers.
I get that.
Number 1, they had very bad wide receivers last year, and they're improved, but not anywhere on 2 and 3 levels. Anyway, go to your number 2. Most intriguing.
My number 2 is Maryland, and
Zach is gonna be watching Mike Locksley like a hawk. Spring.
Yeah. I actually am. I think it's a cool battle. And I know I don't say many nice things about Maryland, but I actually think it's a pretty cool battle for them, because they have a hometown guy who's a top 100 recruit in Malik Washington, competing against Justyn Martin, who, the little bit I saw of him at UCLA, like, I didn't think he was half bad. Like, I thought he played decently against Penn State, which is a good defense. Granted, it's small sample size, but like, I think we've said in the past, quarterback has not been the problem for Maryland. So like, I think this is a fairly intriguing battle. And I think Justyn Martin probably has a leg up right now. I would not be shocked if Washington wins this job, though.
Yeah, I mean, true freshman. He's got some good recruiting rankings. If you're Mike Locksley, if things aren't going well, you show him off, and you hope you get a bit of a DJ Lagway effect that Billy Napier got, where it's like, we can't fire this guy. He's got a really good freshman quarterback,
Yeah, and a great story, like hometown kid. Yeah. So I think that's it's a really neat story, I think.
Yeah. Dwayne says, I figured Tavian and Sayin would be battling more than Keinholz. Tavian's got a lot of hype. I just think everybody has to remember he's coming from either the lowest or the second lowest division in Ohio football. Like it's gonna take a year for him to get used to everything. If Keinholz transfers, then yeah, the battle is between them probably, unless there's a transfer. But yeah, that's what I thought. So Eric says, Zach, who would win between JR and Eric?
I'm not getting in the middle of this one.
We'll discuss that later, Eric. We'll discuss that later.
You're both great. I love you both.
All right. My number 2, I have Oregon. Like I said, very good wide receivers. It's the reason I have number 2 is because of the impactful piece. And I think Dante Moore and Austin Novosad are both really good quarterbacks. And as far as I'm concerned, both of them are going to be very impactful. Like I said, I think Dante Moore has the edge. I think Dante Moore is going to be the guy. But I'm just not I'm not completely turning away Austin Novosad. I think he deserves more respect than just this is Dante Moore's job and nobody else can battle for it. So, All right. Your number 1 most intriguing battle, Zach.
Wisconsin. Most intriguing. Like Billy Edwards, was good a year ago. Like certainly was not helped out by his offensive line.
Say he didn't have an offensive line, and a lot of people mistake that for he was bad, but it wasn't his fault.
So now you're putting him behind a pretty good pass blocking offensive line. And then you're also bringing a young guy in Danny O'Neal, who is pretty decent at San Diego State. I think both quarterbacks are good. I think the question that Luke Fickell is going to have to wrestle with is, do you invest in the long term and go with Danny O'Neal, who you can groom for a couple years? Or do you say, I got to win now? Billy Edwards probably has more experience. But I think the storyline is great. I think you have 2 pretty good options. And I think it's more about psychology than anything else. It's like, am I going to have another year after this one to invest in Danny O'Neal? But I think there's a really good shot for both those guys to come away with a starting job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a good battle. I give the edge to Billy Edwards' experience in the Big Ten and stuff, but Danny O'Neal could come in and surprise. And I think Wisconsin's going to be looking for somebody reliable, and whoever can be that reliable one for him, that's what Jeff Grimes is going to want. I think Danny O'Neal fits that pretty well. Billy Edwards should be able to, but we'll see for sure. So, all right. The last one for me, the most impactful in the Big Ten, because I do truly think this will decide whether or not this team has the potential to compete in the Big Ten or not. If Michigan goes with Mikey Keen, I do not think they will be a contender in the Big Ten. I don't think you have dynamic enough quarterback play. You have 2 good running backs, an offensive line that could be improved, but you don't have a dynamic enough quarterback for that wide receiver room. Donovan McCulley, good wide receiver, but he's not a wide receiver 1. He's not, at least from what I've seen so far. Maybe he surprises us this year and does something different. But Michigan's chance at being a contender this year, in my mind, and I'm not trying to knock Mikey Keen. I know you feel good about him, Zach. I just don't think he's dynamic enough to make up for the deficiencies at wide receiver. And I think Bryce Underwood has that ability to potentially do that. I don't think it's a guarantee because Bryce Underwood's a freshman and that could not go well for them, but I think that that's more likely than to be a playmaker and to get them further and possibly contend for the Big Ten. But that just raises your ceiling, but also lowers your floor. You know what I'm saying? Because Bryce Underwood could be a freshman in some important games. So
I agree with you. When I say I like Mikey Keen and that he's better than the other quarterbacks that Michigan had, that's not saying much when you say he's better than the other 3.
I agree with you. He's better than all the other options they had last year. I agree with you.
Yeah, but I think that's the right read in that. Do they go with someone who might play like a freshman but has the higher ceiling, or do you go with a guy who's going to be more consistent, probably going to get you to 8-4 or 9-3?
I agree. All right, Zach, That's the episode, everybody. I know we're getting out here kind of quick. If you're a basketball fan, head on over to Big Ten After Dark and join us there. It's on this channel and it's over on the basketball channel as well. Whichever one, head on over there. Zach, any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
I just like to tell John we made it under an hour.
Well, don't speak too soon. We got 30 seconds left.
That's all I got.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're under an hour.
See y'all. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. See you later, everybody. Have a good one.